Welcome to the Arctic Route webinar. This webinar will be hosted by our IHS Maritime analysts. We've got Gary Lee, who is the Senior Analyst at IHS Maritime. He's with the RNA team. His main areas of expertise are maritime security and maritime trade, with an emphasis on Asia and the energy sector. And we have Richard Hurley, who is also a Senior Analyst. He's an expert on the Arctic navigational issues as well as the vessel movements. Firstly, I'd like to pass you over to Gary to talk through the subject. Gary, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kat. Hello, everyone, and welcome to IHS Maritime's webinar. There's been much discussion in recent months regarding the feasibility of the Arctic regions as a future maritime trade route. Rapidly shrinking ice coverage during the summer months due to climate change, as well as a host of other political, security, and economic factors, are placing the Arctic back in the spotlight. Now, today we'll discuss some of the key commercial questions surrounding the viability of Arctic routes. I will start by offering an overview of some of the key factors at play, including the commercial drivers, as well as some of the bottlenecks. My colleague Richard Hurley will then drill down into the issues and offer several case studies on recent events that have taken place in the Arctic. Now, please remember that only at IHS do we have the expertise to combine a wide range of data as well as expertise to provide commercial solutions for a wide range of sectors. So what are some of the key questions that are being asked about regarding the Arctic regions? Here are some that we have been asked in the past few months. How safe is it? What advantages will it bring? What sectors are set to benefit from it? How soon can I use it? And can it be an alternative to Suez? We will now try to provide a broad answer to some of these questions. Firstly, we'll examine two of the key commercial drivers for potential future Arctic shipping, that of container trade and liquefied natural gas. These are two main economic drivers stemming from Asia, one of the powerhouses of global trade, if not the powerhouse of current global trade. And it is Asian imports and exports that would have a major impact on future shipping routes. As we can see in this forecast, Asian imports and exports is set to grow steadily in the coming decades, having recovered from the global financial crisis in 2008. This will eventually call for more economical ways of shipping manufactured goods to and from the region. The current trade route that would most benefit from the continued opening up and ease of access of the North Sea route is the Far East Europe route, where in 2012, nearly 14 million TEU of exports were shipped to Europe, and some 6.8 million TEU shipped in the other direction. Attempts have already been made to see if the North Sea route is suitable for long-term trade traffic. Indeed, in September 2013, there was a lot of media attention placed on the journey of the COSCO Rongsheng, a Chinese cargo vessel that transited the North Sea route from Dalian to Rotterdam. This journey was 9 days faster than if it went through the Suez Canal and shaved some 2,400 nautical miles from the journey. This would have translated into major savings in terms of fuel. However, the world fleet is not actually capable of capitalizing on the route for some time to come. Out of the world container fleet of some 5,500 odd vessels, only 765 are classified as ice capable to any extent, only totaling around 1.2 million TEU, while the rest of the fleet accounts for more than 15.9 million TEU. The top 10 operators of ice-capable container vessels account for 37% of the total number of the 765 ice-capable ships. However, the 284 ships account for 657,000 TEU, or just over 50% of the total capacity. By average vessel size, COSCON currently has the lead, with an average of 4,000 TEU per vessel, followed by China Shipping at 3,000 TEU. Maersk, while having the most number of vessels that are ice-capable, only averages around 2,000 TEU capacity per ship. So as we can see, these are generally fairly small container vessels. Operators are also not in any hurry to improve the numbers of ice-capable ships either, with only 7 out of 479 container vessels currently on order being ice-capable. These 7 ships are mostly small classes, with none possessing over 1,000 TEU capacity. In total, they will only add around 5,370 TEU to the fleet, while the other 472 vessels on order are set to add around 3.6 million TEU. This data suggests that Chinese container operators are best placed to take advantage of any future North Sea route transit. However, volumes will not be very considerable for some time to come. In terms of demand for natural gas, Asia as a region is currently dominating the market. In 2012, the market share was around 168 million metric tons, with Japan importing some 87 million, South Korea 36, and China 16 million tons. According to IHS Energy, this market will only continue to grow in the future, with a forecasted demand volume of some 306 million metric tons by 2030. China will be one of the most rapidly growing markets for natural gas as the government attempts to diversify its energy mix by finding alternatives to crude oil and coal. Although LNG is still a relatively small proportion of its energy mix, China is said to be one of the main importers of LNG in the next 20 years. Despite China's growing need for LNG, it was the Japanese market which prompted the first North Sea route LNG shipment in December of 2012. The Gazprom-operated Ob River sailed from the Statoil Stonhuvit gas plant in the Barents Sea, Norway, to Tabata in Japan, carrying some 63,000 metric tons of LNG. The gas was sold to Japan after the shale gas of revolution in the US made the Stonhuvit products short of customers. This was coupled with a sudden increase in demand in Japan for non-nuclear energy following the Fukushima accident. Since the North Sea route was only around half as long as the southern route through Suez, the shipment was deemed financially viable. However, the Arctic LNG potential is not currently reflected in the status of the fleet. Currently, out of the world's 375 LNG tankers, only 29 are classified as ice-capable. Out of these, Japan and Norway own the most at 8 and 6 vessels respectively. The total capacity of the ice-capable LNG fleet is around 3 million cubic meters. Out of the 88 currently ordered, only 10 are ice-capable, and all are being built in South Korea. The Russian operator Sumcov has ordered 470,000 cubic meter capacity ice-capable LNG tankers, with the first one, Veliki Novgorod, being delivered in January of 2014. This suggests strongly that the Russian operators at least are hoping to capitalize on any LNG trade that might develop in the Arctic in the next few years, if not attempt to hold a monopoly on future North Sea route LNG transits entirely. Due to the stringent Russian regulations on the ice classes allowed for the passage, it is unlikely that other ships from the world's LNG fleet will be able to utilize the route to any great extent for the time being. And now we'll move on to some of the major bottlenecks facing the exploitation of the North Sea route. One of the major technical bottlenecks for the NSR is the availability of icebreakers. Despite Russian regulations for transit requiring ships to meet certain criteria, matching that of Russian ice classifications, vessels are nevertheless required to have icebreaker escorts due to the risks of ice floats, even during the summer months. Currently, the Russian icebreaker fleet Atomflot, which is the operator responsible for escorting NSR transits, only have 6 nuclear-powered icebreakers at their disposal, with only another 1 on order. The Atomflot icebreakers, though powerful, are unlikely to meet the demands of increased transit if the NSR is used as a commercial route in the next 10 years. The new icebreaker of the LK60 class will be the largest nuclear-powered icebreaker yet built, but it's only due to enter service in around 2017. We have now covered some of the key commercial drivers for the utilization of the NSR. We now turn to look at one of the security drivers that came to prominence in 2013, that of an alternative to the Suez Canal. On the 31st of August, a Chinese container ship, the COSCO Asia, was fired upon by what Egyptian authorities described as terrorists as it transited the Suez Canal. The weapons used were allegedly light machine guns and a rocket-propelled grenade. While neither type would have been able to cause much damage to large shipping, such as the 100,000 deadweight ton plus COSCO Asia, they nevertheless pose considerable danger to seafarers. However, traffic has not been severely impacted by this attack, with more than 16,000 transits eventually being made in 2013. Although this was the first attack on shipping transiting the Suez since the Egyptian Revolution, threats have been issued before by various groups, ranging from striking workers to militants. The Egyptian military has always stated that it would not tolerate any threats towards the functioning of the canal. Now, this image we see now was created with the assistance from IHS James, which shows a considerable size of the military presence along the canal. Along the route, there are also numerous military airfields, helicopter bases, and naval patrol bases. With the Suez providing 10% of Egypt's national revenue, it's protected to the highest levels. One of the additional problems faced by Arctic shipping is the lack of a comprehensive regulatory framework. Currently, there is no international agreed ice class for Arctic transit. Different classification societies have different criteria for the individual ice classes. This means that the ships needed in transit is only allowed to do so if it meets the requirements of the country which is providing the escort. In the case of the NSR, ships are required not just to have an ice class, but one that meets with Russian standards. The International Maritime Organization is currently working on developing a comprehensive polar code for the transit of vessels in the polar regions. The code will be a more comprehensive set of regulations from previous guidelines, which were voluntary. However, the inclusion of the Antarctic, which has very different characteristics from the Arctic, along with other factors, is delaying the issuing of the code. The current set date for the code to be operational is 2015, with a possible implementation date of 2016. The harsh environment in NSR makes the safety of seafarers a major concern if future routes opened up. As stated above, icebreakers are essential for safe transits even during the summer months. However, Russian search and rescue is stretched thin over this large area. According to the Russian State North Sea Route Administration, there are currently only 3 rescue centers along the route: Dixon in the west, Tixi in the center, and Pevek in the east. Of these, the latter 2 are only operated on a rotational basis during the navigational season, which is between July and October. Currently, only Pevek has helicopters as part of its search and rescue capabilities, although helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft can be utilized from Murmansk. Recently, the Russian government announced the building of 10 new search and rescue centers by 2015, along with 6 new search and rescue vessels. This will go a considerable way to addressing some of the safety concerns present at the moment. I now hand over to my colleague Richard, who will go into some of the topics touched upon in more detail.
Before we look at the actual details of what happened during the 2013 navigation season in the Northern Sea Route, it is worth looking once again at the options which are now opening up with a shrinking ice coverage in the Arctic. Of the 2 options most likely to be used in the near future, the Northern Sea Route and the Northwest Passage. Now, these are navigable during the summer months only, and of these 2, the Northern Sea Route through the Russian Arctic waters offers perhaps the most open passage available. There are limits on the northernmost extremities caused by the ice pack, but there is more open water in the Northern Sea Route, and the Northwest Passage itself is more prone to drifting pack ice blocking the channels on a temporary basis. There's a further central corridor which is envisaged to perhaps open up by about 2014. This depends on the more extreme predictions of the climate scientists coming true regarding global warming. So for the moment it can be discounted. If we now look at the 2013 session, we need to understand that ice coverage in the Arctic is annually at its greatest extent in February, and its least extent in September. This means that the navigation season for the Northern Sea Route is normally from around late June to September. The opening up depending obviously on how quickly the ice sheet retreats, and the closure when the freeze starts again in September. More recent years, Arctic warming has made its most difference to the extent of the ice in the summer. So Arctic ice in winter is pretty constant still, but it's the extent in summer which is offering these options for navigation through the Northern Sea Route. And in fact, in 2012, we saw that the Northern Sea Route was considered to be ice-free from August 2012. Now, by ice-free, we are not talking about a total absence of ice in the area, but it's an absence of the continuous ice sheet. So it still means that the presence of icebreakers may be needed at times to get through. What we saw in 2013, however, was that the summer minima was actually 29% higher than predicted. In other words, there was more ice than predicted, and this meant that icebreakers were still required for vessels passing in north of the East Siberian islands throughout the whole of the navigation season. And this is reflected in the passages that we saw. The number of transits in the northern sea routes did, however, go up. And we saw an increase of around 54%, the number of ships actually transiting, as opposed to just being in the northern sea areas, actually transiting in the sea route from either north or from the east or the west. So in 2011 we saw 41 transits. 2012 this increased only very slightly to 46, but 2013 we saw an increase to 71 transits through this northern part. There were around 267 vessels seen in total in the area, but these weren't necessarily making transits through the whole of the northern sea route. They were either vessels in the Barents Sea area going up to the offshore areas there, or they were vessels transiting locally between ports in northern Russia, so local traffic. We saw 25 non-Russian vessels from 11 flags, however, in the northern sea route. And of these, 10 vessels made through passages either east-west or west-east. 9 of the vessels that went through the northern sea route carried export cargoes from Russian ports. Now, one other statistic of note is that there are only 6 large icebreakers in total employed during this period, not necessarily all at the same time. So it's a comparatively small number of icebreakers that are available at any one time for that. Moving on, we saw a couple of interesting or sad search and rescue incidents which illustrate the dangers to vessels navigating in these northern waters. The first was incident of a hauling of a Russian tanker, floating tanker, the Nordvik, in the Matson Strait on September the 4th. Now, the second one was the loss of a helicopter from the Canadian Coast Guard ship Amundsen on the 9th of September. And so we'll go on to discuss these incidents in a little bit more detail to show just what effect they potentially had to safety and navigation. If we look at the Nordvik, this was a small Russian tanker actually transiting between ports in the Russian Arctic, and on the 4th of September it actually hit ice and only put a small 1 meter hole in the ballast tank. No major pollution ensued, but the vessel was obviously in a condition where it needed assistance. Unfortunately, the first icebreaker to reach the vessel, this damaged vessel, didn't reach there till the 9th of September, so 5 days later, the icebreaker Tamir. And it wasn't until 2 further days that a Russian tanker, the Boris Belkitsky, could reach her to help offload the diesel fuel on board the tanker. So comparatively slow response rate because of the distances involved and the small number of vessels there. And in fact, a second icebreaker, the Vegach, joined on the 14th, and together they escorted the Nordvik to port. So comparatively minor incident, but still requiring the assistance of quite a large proportion of the major search and rescue assets in the area. If we go on to the second incident, which is for the Canadian Coast Guard ship Amundsen, although this was in the Northwest Passage, not the Northern Sea Route, it also illustrates the paucity of search and rescue assets in the area, in these areas. And what happened on the 9th of September was, tragically, the helicopter of the Coast Guard ship collided with ice and crashed whilst doing an ice reconnaissance in front of the icebreaker. Unfortunately, although the 4 persons on board actually survived the incident, They subsequently perished despite having survival suits in the approximately 2 hours it took for the icebreaker to reach the crash site. This single incident and had two major knock-ons. First of all, the Amundsen, although she was a research icebreaker and not one of the major icebreakers, was the only search and rescue asset in the area, and of course she'd lost her helicopter, which severely affected her ability to perform this task. At the same time, tragically, one of the persons on board the helicopter was in fact the captain of the icebreaker, and so as a result the Amundsen was ordered to return to port, and of course this left a gap in the coverage in this particular area. The helicopter was eventually recovered, but the vessel itself was taken out of the search and rescue asset for this important section of the Northwest Passage. So again, it shows what is one small tragic incident can seriously affect the amount of search and rescue assets available to support transits. Finally, just going on, we're talking about the Northwest Passage. There was one vessel last year which made the full Northwest and Northern Sea Route passage, which was the Nordic Orion. And this shows the passage that she took around northern Russia, into the Far East, across to the American West Coast, and then back through the Northwest Passage back to Europe. And again, it's a marvellous feat of seamanship, but it must remember that in both the Northwest Passage and the Northern Sea Route, the Nordic Orion did require the assistance of icebreakers to help her break her way through areas of continuous ice. So it's by no means a free passage. However, it did show that the Northwest Passage shaved over 1,000 miles off the Panama Canal route for the passage from the west coast of America to Europe, and she was able to carry 25% more cargo than was possible through the canal. Finally, a last word on icebreakers, and this graphic shows the number of icebreakers that are currently available in the world, and you can see the vast majority of them belong to Russia. And in fact, the vast majority of the large icebreakers, which are really the ones required for the lead-throughs in the northern sea areas, also belong to Russia. And it's also worth remembering that a lot of these vessels are not actually used for passage clearance. They're actually used for the clearance of ports. So, for example, in Canada, it would be the clearance of the St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes, and in Russia, into the clearance of the ports in the Baltic and into northern Russia. So a lot of these vessels are not big icebreakers, so there is a very limited supply of the large icebreakers necessary to lead through.